welcome to Finding Solutions. I'm Dan Elvis. I serve as the Member of Parliament for Okanagan Lake West, South Kelowna, and this podcast is all about focusing on the issues, the people working in our communities to make our communities stronger, and hopefully our countries as well. We focus on solutions and try to get past the headlines. Today, we're very, very lucky because I'm joined by Macklin McCall, MLA for West Kelowna Peachland, and who is newly appointed as the official opposition whip in the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Since Macklin was first elected in 2024, he's been working on behalf of the residents in West Kelowna Peachland while taking on various critic roles. And today we'll be talking about a number of issues that matter to people here in the Central Okanagan, including supporting residents and businesses that continue to rebuild and recover following the devastating McDougall Creek wildfire of 2023, advocating for a fair and necessary allocation of rural RCMP members, and continuing need for infrastructure improvements throughout the riding. We'll also discuss what he's hearing from constituents, the challenges facing British Columbians more broadly, and where he sees opportunities for practical solutions and positive change. Macklin, welcome to Finding Solutions.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, Chief, so I should say opposition whip. So does that have you excited?
Yeah, that's, I started out as the emergency management critic, and then went to public safety and solicitor general, and now I'm in a completely new role, a leadership role, really, opposition whip. And, I'm excited to be in that role. It's going to have new challenges. And, I think also working to making sure our caucus is united, working well. And, of course, British Columbians expect us to fire on all cylinders here and hold the NDP's feet to the fire.
Well, it's great for our region to have someone in a leadership role in the Legislative Assembly. Congrats to you. And
thank you.
Also, I've been talking to some of your caucus colleagues, Christina Lowen and Gavin Dew, who both said the vibe in caucus is strong. They're all rallying behind Carrie Lynn Finley, and I'm glad you're on the front lines. So let's talk about a minute or so about you and your background. Some of our viewers may not know what you did before politics. Maybe we can start there.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to where I grew up because I think it's relevant, certainly to the Okanagan and my constituents and my riding. I'm born and raised in the Okanagan. A lot of people don't realize that, but I was born in Penticton, grew up in Okanagan Falls on a family farm. I went to high school in Oliver. And then I went to college at OUC. It was OUC then, it's OC now, in Penticton at the campus there. I took criminology, psychology, and sociology. And then I was an auxiliary constable at Penticton Detachment. So basically like a volunteer police officer, essentially. Great experience. I was very young. I was like 19 years old when I got into that. And then from there, I joined the RCMP. I became a regular member with the RCMP. I signed on the dotted line, as they say, in Penticton Detachment. And the following week, I got sent to Regina, to Depot. I was there for 6 months training. I was lucky, though, because I was there from May 7th till October 22nd. Some people aren't that lucky. They're there, through the winter. But one thing I found really interesting, I'd never been into the prairies. I've been to Calgary before, but never in Regina. And it was a bit of we'll call it culture shock, I guess. I mean, the mountains and the lakes, they're not as, the 4-story buildings at Depot were a bit like mountains for me. I tried to, tried to make it kind of more like I was in BC. But something I found very interesting, my prairie experience, June 3rd, it snowed actually. So that was an interesting thing. But I did I graduated from Depot on October 22nd and I got posted right here in Kelowna, actually was my first post. I actually got a compassionate posting. A lot of people say, well, how did you get posted in Kelowna? You're from Penticton. There's a joke in the RCMP that how they choose your detachment that you're posted to is they throw a dart at the map of Canada and that's your posting. So what happened, actually, my dad had an accident on the farm. I had a tractor roll over him and break his back. And he was in VGH and intensive care and all of this most of the time I was at Depot. And I asked the RCMP for a compassionate posting in the Okanagan to help my parents on the farm. So the RCMP posted me here in Kelowna, which I'm grateful for that. And then I worked 4 years in Kelowna, particularly in Rutland. And then I transferred to Lake Country Detachment, and I was 4 years there. And then I transferred to West Kelowna Detachment, and I was 4 years there. And then I went back to Kelowna, where I was on different units. So I was on the bike patrol, particularly in the downtown core, but also going to the parks. And then I was on the downtown enforcement unit, which was particularly dealing with the issues in the downtown core. When there was a lot more of a presence in homeless individuals and street level crime and stuff. I was right there dealing with that. And then I was on the crime reduction unit for a bit. It was fun. That was dealing with problem residences, we'll call it, across the town. And then went back to Rutland, and I was supervising, which is another new kind of leadership role in policing. And then I ended up resigning from the RCMP, and I put my name in the nomination race to become the candidate for West Kelowna Peachland. I ran against another fellow, and I ended up winning and became the candidate. And then I was door knocking for a year. 15,000 houses I went to. Great experience. Really just throwing your feet in the fire there and just walking up and knocking on the door, I think prepares you pretty well for building skills to do this job, I think. And then I got elected, and here we are today. So
wow. So let's just talk a little bit about the RCMP. And it's fascinating that you spent most of the time here. And I can totally understand why many people will be quite jealous, because usually people come to BC for the weather, usually in their older years. But for yourself, if a young person was thinking about the RCMP, what do you think they should know before they sign on the dotted line, as you said?
Well, it's I don't know of any other job or career out there that's like it. I found it invaluable myself to not just go, oh, I'll do that and go and do it, but I went to the detachment, I spoke to officers, I talked to people, I tried to understand what the job was like, because that's important, right? Obviously, it's a career you go into where you could be in there for a lot of years. I found it very helpful talking to people who have done it, getting that perspective. Also, it's not the same job that it was even when I joined. I know even when I joined, 20-year constables were saying that to me, but it has changed certainly now and continues to change. I think, there's certain things I think that are more accepted now, like mental health is a big deal. It wasn't as much when I first got in. That's something I think that is important for people getting into the career to be aware of, the challenges, what it does with families and just everything about how it operates, because a lot of times I've known people in my career that got into policing thinking, oh, it's like this. I saw it on TV. They have an understanding of what it's like, and it's nothing like that. And they go to DEFL and they do all this investment into training and everything, and then they end up leaving because it's a pretty challenging job.
That's very challenging.
Yeah.
So, if I were a police officer and I saw yourself now in the Legislative Assembly, I would say, hey, finally someone understands what it's like. So when you go to the Legislative Assembly with that mindset, what are some of the things that you keep in mind when you're debating a lot of these issues, whether they be dealing with, disorder, homelessness, drugs, mental health?
Mm-hmm. One thing that sticks with me from when I was door knocking in my riding, one person, in fact, a few people brought up the fact that, oh, you're an ex-police officer, I'm going to vote for you. And they said, because police officers are dealing with a lot of the issues our province is facing right now. And I didn't think of it that way, but that made sense, because there are a lot of things the police deal with that are issues right now in the province. And so I always think of that in the conversations I had at the door. And of course, as you said, the experiences I had as an officer. And when I'm in Victoria, I often think of that. I think of because police, I think in general, experience things that the public doesn't really see or experience. And so having that knowledge in Victoria, I think is very helpful, because, I can explain something a little in a different perspective, the policing kind of perspective. Also, maybe, as I just said, about some of the challenges with policing that officers might endure. I have that understanding of how that, maybe looking at that provincially might help the police service, might help the response times, that might help officers be safe, which then helps the communities be safe. I think those are things that are often overlooked. The general public doesn't really understand that because they haven't done it. So I think that having that perspective of actually being an officer in the past, I think is very helpful in terms of ensuring that not just the police, but public safety in general in the province is bolstered, and we're supporting the people that are keeping us safe in British Columbia, and standing up for them too, where it's when you do that, it pays dividends in terms of the overall public safety of our province, because the people doing the safety are able to do the job more efficient, more effectively, and be safe themselves.
And, and that's critically important. I also, one thing I would want to know is what's the morale like? Because the experience of being an officer today is much more complicated. And, when I do speak to officers, when I speak to members, they say, we need the tools, and we also need the backing, not just of elected officials. I'm sure they can count on both of us, but also just of the public.
Yeah.
So what would you say to an officer who's entering into it today? What are the things that you and I can do to advocate for them? Because I think for them, a lot of them feel very connected to their communities, like that desire to serve their communities is so there. But it must be frustrating when they see a catch and release system, or they see where people are getting away on technicalities, or there just isn't Crown resources to prosecute.
Absolutely. And I think that what I experienced and what I've experienced now as the public, in the past year now, and just yesterday up till being the public safety critic, I've dealt with a lot of officers across the province, organizations, unions, this type of thing. And I think that, the job will always be challenging. I think officers train for that. They understand that. But I think something that I think is very difficult that you can't really train for is as you said, like, it's public perception. And that's not just, hey, what are the public doing? I think the police predominantly do a very good job in this province and this country when it comes to policing. But there are issues where you can do the best job here in Kelowna today. And, maybe the organization doesn't let the public know, or maybe the media doesn't report on it, or they twist it one way or the other on purpose or by accident, I don't know, but the information's not getting out there. And that skews and can influence public perception of policing. I think that that's a very big hardship, I think, for police. And also, I think politicians, there's a lot of politicians that are making decisions on how policing and public safety work, and they've never done it in their life. And I don't, that's not lost on me. I don't judge them for that. But I would love to see a politician, like a public safety minister, for example, say, I want to do a ride along with the police. I want to understand what policing's like, or any emergency service. I think that personally would go a long way with policing. Also, as a cop, I never saw politicians or people higher up in the organization or media sometimes saying, great job by the police. They did something great in the community. You don't get that. It really is a thankless job. I really do think that not just the public, because you do get the odd public that says, hey, thank you for your service. Thank you for doing that. But I think if you had politicians saying, my police officers did a great job, I think it goes a long way. Yeah. Not only for the officers to feel like, hey, my member of parliament noticed something great we did in our community, or my MLA or my mayor or one of my councillors, but that then goes outward, I think, to the public as well, saying, hey, my member of parliament just recognized the great work the RCMP did. Maybe they are great. Maybe I'll look, wow, that is good. And then I think it changes where it's more officers are getting, seeing that there is that support. Yes. Because I can tell you that's, for me, even as an officer, I speak to myself, it's very difficult because you're risking your life, and literally in some circumstances, for perfect strangers. You've never met them before. You'll never see them again. And they do it every single time, and they'll continue to do it.
Heroes. Yeah,
absolutely. But having that, I try to do that. I did that very often as a public safety critic, not just my own, as our West Kelowna detachment, but I would see great work that I saw across the province. And as the critic for public safety, I would say, great job, Prince George RCMP, great job, Vancouver Police Department, because I never saw that as a police officer. Yeah. I think it goes a long way.
Mac, that's a really good reminder for us all, because they do serve, and it does come at quite a cost, and they're willing to do it. And I think that they should hear that their politicians support them And anyway, that's a great point. Now, speaking about politicians supporting the people, we had the terrible McDougall Creek fire in 2023. I remember at the time, so many resources pouring in across the province. Obviously, huge human costs, both property, people being evacuated, the particulate in the air, all those things. And the premier comes in and he says, we're going to help people and to help them recover. And that's what premiers and that's what all politicians should be doing. But there is a part of our riding, Okanagan Lake Resort, where there's a group of tenants. And this first came up during the 2025 federal election, at least to my mind, where they came to a debate and said, we need help. Maybe if you can tell our listeners a little bit about why is this group of homeowners still not rebuilding their lives? Mm-hmm. What's holding them up?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. As you said, Lake Okanagan Resort, great location. It was absolutely destroyed in the McDougall Creek wildfire, as you said, in 2023, in August 2023. The issue really is it's unincorporated. It's along West Side Road. It's outside of any municipality. And I mean, in the city, you have public water, public utilities. Out there, they don't. That's the initial issue that they're facing. What it is you have Lake Okanagan Resort as a whole. You have a couple separate stratas that are not owned by Lake Okanagan Resort on the property itself. Those stratas have like 99 people that live in them. It's high rise, not high rises. It's like condos, I guess, right? A couple buildings. So, and that's great. There they are. But then you look at the water. Well, it's not hooked up to city water. It's quite a ways from West Kelowna. So Lake Okanagan Resort owns the utility. It's their water system. It's not public. And this strata, not owned by Lake Okanagan Resort, their water is hooked up to Lake Okanagan Resort's water. And so the owner of Lake Okanagan Resort would then make the decision to develop, to change whatever the owner would do with the damage to the resort. And still today, the owner hasn't done that, and that's their right to do it, being private property. However, the problem with that is these other 99 residents, they want to get back to building and even just removing the rubble from the fire from like 3 years ago here. And they can't do that. They can't even get building permits. They can't even get a building permit because you require water and electricity to do it. So they can't even start. They can't even clean up the rubble. And that's a big deal because if it was a public water system, this wouldn't be a question. And so initially what they were asking was, we just want to get the waters established so we can get our building permit back and we can actually start cleaning it, start building it, and move back into these places. So they initially started by going to the regional district, because it is regional district land, and said, hey, there's a provision under Provincial Act where, because of what's happened, the province can go in, or the regional district can go in and basically obtain or seize, for lack of a better term, this water. It becomes public. They fix it. They get it all working, and then it would go into the hands of the regional district. It would be public, and they'd work it all out, whether there's charges that go, whatever. But the point is something like that would have to happen for these individuals to even get a building permit to clean the place up. So it's 3 years later and they've done nothing, and they have been fighting hard to get something just to start.
So again, they whether it be to just get a permit, like you said, to start clearing the site so that they can rebuild their lives. Mm-hmm. Right now, the local government won't give them a permit because it won't take over the system that exists, and the provincial government won't do it either. Mm-hmm. So they're stuck in this chicken and egg scenario where they can't start up. And for many of these people, this was the most affordable place they could live, and they're still, again, 3 years later. Yeah. So what have you been doing then to try to get the attention of the provincial government? Because to me, again, the premier said, we will have the backs of, and help people to rebuild. That has not happened.
Absolutely. And that's important, because I remember everyone I talked to in West Kelowna remembers the Prime Minister was even here that week, I think, as well, with the fire in the background. Premier Eby was standing there saying that we will be here, we will help rebuild. So I tried to go down the existing act that these individuals were trying to go down for a number of years before I was involved with it, right after the fire. Going through the regional district, trying to get the comptroller to get involved. And that became a bit of a problem. The province actually said, you're going to have to sue the owner. And I think the owner's not in Canada. That becomes a big problem, right? So I did some research, because this isn't just a derelict property that was let go and here we are with an issue. This actually happened because of the wildfire. And so the fire happened in August of 2023. Well, I believe it was April of 2023. The provincial government brought in the Emergency Disaster Management Act. And in that act, just months before this fire occurred, there's several, it's quite a big act. There's one section particularly that speaks of the act. Basically, this gave power and authority to the province to step in during a fire, to take over a property. Maybe if they have to put a fire guard through a property, they had then authority to do that during fire. But that's not the extent of it. There was the other half of that same section that says they can also, the province can step in and seize property and utilities and so on in the reconstruction, rebuilding phase.
So literally, they drafted a bill, passed in the spring of 2023, and then this fire happens. Again, the government gave itself the authority to act, and they still haven't acted.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I stood up in question period, and I explained that in the question and asked, will the emergency management minister stand up today and help the people in Lake Okanagan Resort? And so I'll look at it, and then we had a bit of a Zoom meeting. There was 2 ministers and a whole whack of staff, and they basically said, no, that's not what it meant. That's not what the intention was. I said, I'm looking at it and it says this. And there was, in my view, it looks like the wording would, it's the textbook example of that second section, the second part of that section, that during a rebuild, that they can step in and seize the utility and do the work. I think it's specifically in their act, but the minister doesn't agree with me. And they told me, you need to go back to the regional district and they will do the appropriate steps to issue a building permit. And I was like,
again, are you chicken and the egg?
But we were going back. They were going back to step one, and the people at Lake Okanagan Resort had been doing that for years. They worked really well with the regional district, but the regional district has sent a letter to myself and to the affected individuals saying they've kind of exhausted all avenues. It's now the province that has to step in. So it is a bit of this revolving door, but these individuals, these 99 residents, they can't even clean up the property. After August will be 3 years.
Well, all I can say here is that I'm glad that their MLA was listening, and I'm glad that you were able to press the government in question period. But to me, it's absolutely unconscionable that a provincial government would give itself these resources and with a clear need for housing, not even help these people get to stage one. It's unconscionable.
I agree.
So another area that we should probably talk about that affects the central Okanagan, particularly the rural areas, is the unfair allocation of RCMP rural members. And maybe you could talk a little bit of people about how this system works, because many people, when they think that their tax dollars, like that there's the West Kelowna detachment we were talking earlier, they do great work. But maybe you can talk about how each detachment has different allocations of police to certain areas.
Absolutely. The important thing is we have Vancouver City Police. Everyone knows what that is, right? Down in policing a big city. And then we have right here in Kelowna, we have the Kelowna RCMP. And then we have small towns, which are provincial, 100% provincial policing. The province provides those policing, like Tumbler Ridge, like Atlands, like these Caslow, like these small towns where there's not, they're so basically if it's under 5,000, the province has to provide policing. So that's provincial. The provincial police deal with that. Now, this is where it gets murky because the RCMP do 3 things in British Columbia. They do federal policing everywhere in the country, and that's the province municipalities have nothing to do with that. That's Ottawa, and that's outside of everything we're dealing with in the province. Then there's provincial policing. A lot of people don't realize that the RCMP, they are the province's provincial police. The province of British Columbia has contracted out the Mounties to do provincial policing, all provincial policing. And then municipalities can contract them out. So West Kelowna has contracted out the Mounties to be their city police force, like their VPD. So has Kelowna. They've contracted out the RCMP to be their city police force. So here in West Kelowna, Kelowna is so big, it's over 15,000 people that they're responsible to provide their police. But when you go to West Kelowna, the detachment and our riding on the west side there has multiple communities. West Kelowna is the bigger center. West Bank First Nations is pretty big as well. But you have Peachland. Well, Peachland's just over 5,000 people. So they don't have, the province doesn't outright provide the police. They have a bit of an agreement with the province. And then, of course, there's where Lake Okanagan Resort is. That's all unincorporated regional district. That is provincial land. It is under 5,000 people. The province provides police service to Trepanier on the west side, to Joe Rich, these outside kind of areas. And that's important because when you look at provincial policing, so the province is responsible for that. The municipalities don't provide that. They don't fund it. They don't do anything. The province of British Columbia provides that. So when you look at all these integrated services in the Lower Mainland, like IHIT, like Highway Patrol, like Air Services, like Police Dogs Section, the emergency response team we have here and across the province, West Coast Marine Section, IHIT, all these units, those are all provincial. Mm-hmm. So those, if you had more provincial resources, there'd be more bodies in those positions and they'd be able to respond quicker, faster. It would be just all around good. And I bring that up, the integrated units, because they predominantly are in the Lower Mainland. Well, if there was a big conversation about when the bridge was shut down and we had to wait for like 24 hours for the explosive disposal unit in Vancouver, the Mounties provincial unit, to travel here, well, people said, well, let's double it. Let's have our own. Well, if we had more of these provincial Mountie resources, maybe that would be doubled. There'd be more. That's the point in that. When you get here to the Okanagan and to West Kelowna, it's got provincial resources and it has municipal. So we'll get the municipal out of the way because the West Kelowna detachment deals with that. The West Kelowna city deals with that. And they continually year over year fund that. The problem is the provincial contingent of the Mounties. And it's not anything the RCMP is doing, it's the funding from the province of British Columbia. Now, people don't realize this, but the provincial Mounties, the number is at 2,602 RCMP officers. It has not gone up by one single police officer since 2012. Not one.
So since 2012, despite the growth of our communities, particularly in the central Okanagan, the census always shows us as being a high growth area. But despite that population increase, the amount of provincial police allocated has not changed throughout the whole province.
Not by one person since 2012. And actually, to add, and you're correct. So to add a little bit more to that, during estimates just a few months ago now with the minister, where I was grilling the public safety minister, we were going on some of the questions regarding provincial policing funding. So the authorized strength, what is on paper we're supposed to have, is 2,602. Hasn't changed since 2012. Now they move resources all over and say, see, if there's a need, boom, there's RCMP officers. They're being moved from provincially into that location, right? But she confirmed that currently, out of that 2,602, there's 2,400 RCMP officers in the provincial contingent. So we're going backwards. I've talked to the National Police Federation, the union for the RCMP. They said if we added 300 Mounties to the provincial contingent, just the provincial, today, we'd be at 2012 levels. So we are so behind, you got to ask the question, if we just added 300 more RCMP officers to British Columbia, that were provincial, that could go all over where the need is as needed, how much safer would our communities be? If we added 1,000, I don't know what the number would be today if you did the math up to 2026 numbers, but if you added hundreds of more Mounties across the province, I mean, I often look, having been the minister, and you see this, all the people watching, and in this community, there's a lot of concerns with public safety, as there is everywhere. But I often wonder, could the lack of provincial Mounties that are backing up other units who are some of the actual detachment itself in West Kelowna, if we had more police officers everywhere, I mean, is this contributing to the public safety crisis we're seeing in BC?
So let's maybe speed forward then to the local context, because it's not often that you have like myself, yourself, so federal, provincial, and then both the mayor of West Kelowna, Gord Milsom, and Patrick von Menzel from Peachland, and Chief Robert Louie from West Bank First Nation held a press conference. Maybe if you could just say what the call was and why it was important for our local area.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because when you look at, well, we had the numbers for West Kelowna detachment. The RCMP themselves actually did their own report. They did their study on West Kelowna detachment in terms of resources. The reason is because West Kelowna is breaking away from Kelowna detachment to be its own standalone detachment. Mm-hmm. So they did their own report. That report showed that West Kelowna detachment is absolutely full with their City of West Kelowna funded police office mounties, right? But they're missing 7 provincially funded RCMP officers. That's huge, 7 officers when you have like a 45-man detachment. They're missing 7. So that became a point of contention, because if that's West Kelowna, and we know the province members are funded everywhere, they move all over, that's one detachment. This could be the one detachment with the report that's showing the numbers, and it could be everywhere in British Columbia. So as you've said, all the elected officials on the west side came together, and we noticed how important it is to have a well-funded and well-staffed police force. You might have to go down to West Side Road, way out of town. You don't want half of your force down there, and you get the point. But it became important and serious because public safety is an important, serious issue. It's one of the top issues, I would say, in British Columbia, certainly in our area. And we all came together. I think it was a great approach. Did a press conference. We had 2 mayors. We had the Chief Rob Louie, yourself for the federal component, and myself. Did a press conference, explained, how important it is to the community, safety. We want these members. And the point is that it's the responsibility of the province of British Columbia to provide those. It is not the responsibility of the City of West Kelowna. It's not the responsibility of West Bank First Nations. The province is required. It's their job. And we went from 2,602, 2012 levels. We're currently at 2,400. And so that's one detachment. And my concern was it's all over. So by doing that, we ended up getting, after a couple months of pressure by all 5 of us, really, the province said, we're going to give you 3 RCB officers now and 3 next year. So that's a great win.
Yeah. So, and again, I think when local taxpayers say that if they pay for a service, it should be there. And essentially they were subsidizing the lack of funding for the province, because, the RCMP are going to go where they're called. If someone is, being broken into in a rural area, they're going to go out there and enforce the law. Right. But that means there's one less person dealing with these issues. So, Macklin, I actually think that your push, I think I give full credit to the mayors and Chief Louie for coming together, because I've never seen that as my time as a member of Parliament. We all stood united, but then you took that to the provincial capital, and they acknowledged the problem, and I look forward to having this resolved, because I think it's been 10 plus years.
Yes.
Where successive mayors have been fighting this fight. So anyway, just some good news, and thank you for your work on that.
Yes.
I guess they at least there was one police officer they listened to, or former police officer they listened to.
Yes.
So let's just maybe talk a little more about the other needs, because ever since I came to the west side, there's always been this issue where the province underfunds infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Victoria is always focused on various battles over various things. And it seems to me that under the NDP, they're more fixated on the regions on the island and particularly on the Lower Mainland than the interior or north. Mm-hmm. So the bridge has been a constant issue. I know that you had some thoughts about the Bill Bennett Bridge and what's going on with that. Maybe you could just share some thoughts with our viewers.
Yeah. So, of course, everyone in West Kelowna and Peachland in my riding, as you know, that they're all coming into Kelowna. A lot of them work over here. There's the hospital, there's Costco. there's the airport, there's a lot of traffic over the bridge from the west side into Kelowna. And so the bridge was rebuilt. They put this new bridge in 2009. When that occurred, there was an agreement. The then BC Liberal provincial government made an agreement with West Bank First Nations, the city of West Kelowna. They made an agreement that, okay, we're going to agree it. We're going to build this, but we're going to give you three things. We're going to give you an overpass at West Side Road, which has been completed right at the same time they completed that. They also agreed that they are going to build an interchange at West's Boucherie and Horizon, right there, that intersection, and West Lake Road, they're going to build an interchange. Those were agreed upon. The province signed off on it. That was part of the agreement, and everyone was happy with it and said, yes, we'll do this. Still today in 2026, they're still in the planning phase of that. I think that's completely unacceptable. You as well as everybody else know the traffic all year, but especially now that the tourists are here along Highway 97 coming into Kelowna. That's something that the province promised. It still hasn't been delivered. As you said, there's several other things in our riding and in the Okanagan where it certainly seems that the Okanagan is being neglected versus other areas like the Lower Mainland and the island.
Well, you know what? It seems to be almost a pattern of disrespect because another big burning issue, and this does sometimes involve burning, is worries about the lack of redundancy with the BC Hydro line. We had that Badugo Creek fire we were speaking of earlier, where people were quite concerned that the power could be shut off on all the west side, shutting down businesses, putting people in the dark, especially during the time of public safety. So maybe there has been some progress on that. Where are you at? What are you seeing and hearing?
There has been progress. There is a plan that I guess BC Hydro and I guess Fortis have kind of agreed. We're dealing with BC Hydro on the west side, and the plan is to put 100-foot metal hydro poles, high voltage hydro transmission lines, 100-foot metal right through a residential area down Old Okanagan Highway or down Shannon Lake Road, connecting to Highway 97, traveling all the way down Highway 97, basically to the top of the bridge hill here, and then it will go under the lake into Kelowna. As you can probably imagine, the west side is very beautiful. I mean, I don't think there's any location where you don't have a view of the lake or a nice, beautiful view. You don't have 100-foot metal transmission line like the poles, right? That's a little bit of a shock. There was several. I think it was 4 things that were on the table. So these are some options. And then we've now, in the last few months, the people in the riding and the mayors and council and the chief Louis and everything have all been told by BC Hydro, this is the final plan. We want to hear feedback, and we're going to decide and execute on it. This will be the plan in the fall. So in that time, there's been some town halls the city's put on, BC Hydro's put on. A lot of public have shown up to those. I don't think I know there was a lot of concerns about those poles because that's going to change absolutely everything in West Kelowna. And I've personally gone and talked to as many people as I can. I don't know the number. I ask them, hey, you've heard about that? Everyone's heard about it. I have yet to find a single person that supports it. Everyone says, I don't want that. Like we need that. They've wanted the redundant line, and it's a safety issue. There's a good reason to have that, but not at the expense of the beauty of West Kelowna, the views, the property value. Someone built a house and you're going to have a high transmission hydro line that's 100 feet in the air, right where your kids are playing at the yard. You didn't buy your house knowing that. It's changing things. Then Highway 97. I mean, that's the third busiest area in the province. And that's going to have these 100-foot poles right down Highway 97 all the way down to Bridge Hill. I don't agree with that. I don't know anyone that does currently. I haven't met anyone. Maybe there is somebody. But I think that, I want to see the province. I want to see the BC Hydro really listen to the people in West Kelowna, because if there's what it appears to be a lot of people that are not happy with this, I want to see the province and BC Hydro go, okay, maybe we should. Because here's the thing. They would never do that down Harvey Avenue in Kelowna. They would never do it down Granville in Vancouver. Why do they expect West Kelowna residents to have to see that every single day? Completely change everything about West Kelowna.
No. Well, this is the thing is that, are they really listening? That's, my file federally is the transportation. And right now there's the Alto project, and communities are being forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. And the people that go to these town halls are literally do not feel that they are being listened to. So, I certainly appreciate that people are concerned, and I really hope that BC Hydro, listens to what you're saying and then makes some big revisions. So, Kelowna Regional Park. I was in Ottawa for the last few weeks of the session when that fire broke out, and for a lot of people, there was a lot of fear. There was an immediate response, but maybe you can just tell us a little bit about, because you were here at the time, and just given your experience working on that end of the public safety file provincially, maybe you could share a little bit of what went on, what was done well, and what the province can maybe improve on.
Yeah, so it was perfect conditions for a fire to spread fast and aggressively, and that's what happened. A fire started in Kelowna, and the wind was blowing quite heavily, and it was blowing kind of back off of the lake up the hill there to right into houses, and of course the fire started, and then it started spreading very fast, very quickly, and of course the emergency services, police started evacuating, the fire chief and West Kelowna Fire Department. It was their area. It was kind of outside the mandate of BC Wildfire Service, apparently, because it wasn't on crown land. It was in a park in town. So the chief was running the show. The local fire department was dealing with it, and they were on it very quickly. So as that was happening, as I was kind of seeing what was going on out the window and hearing local media and so on, I got in touch with ministers for Minister Parmar, with the Minister of Forestry, who's responsible and in charge of BC Wildfire Service. And I explained, hey, this is happening right now. The wind is blowing. Like if you don't get air support on this, we're going to lose houses. Like we need it ASAP. And before I was even done the conversation, there was, because we do have some local helicopters and so on in West Kelowna that often do respond in West Kelowna and the area as well. But the retardant out of Penticton, like there was heavy air support. And the thing that's interesting about that too, it was an on-crown land. That was not their world to deal with. It was local fire department, but the minister got it on there. The province got that air support, and there was a lot. And I think that was a major factor in helping the fire department contain it and protect houses. And then, of course, I was in touch with the chief of staff with the Ministry for Emergency Management. And these are very fluid, play-by-play kind of conversations, texts and phone calls. Just, want to understand, okay, now there was the evacuation happening. Okay, where are they going? What's the plan? What resources? What are you deploying? All of this. And I have to say, they were actually, both of them, and the response, I think, was quite good. So
I spoke to some local emergency support services volunteers, and they said that they were right on it. And it from my vantage point, of course, being in Ottawa, wasn't a very good one. But that was something that was much stronger, and it seemed very well organized. So credit to West Kelowna Fire Rescue, the whole team there for jumping on this, for you, activating wildfire, and certainly for those volunteers who jumped at the opportunity to be there for our citizens.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was like an immediate response. The response was very impressive, how quick it came together, because it was just moving fast, and the response was met the challenge of how fast it was moving, how fast the response was being deployed. That was really good to see. For sure. So
you've also been working on the area, though, on volunteer response to help deal with some of these things. You even tabled legislation. Mm-hmm. I'd love for you just to kind of talk a little bit about the private members bill, what you were trying to do with that legislation.
Sure. So when I first started, I was the critic for emergency management. And so before I joined the RCMP, I actually fought wildfires with BC Wildfire Service. So I had done that before. I had got the training that they give you, the kind of crash course, and then you're able to go and do the work. And that was a paid position, but it was an emergency service as well as policing. I also was a volunteer as an auxiliary constable, and I was literally responding to calls with police, doing all kinds of things that officers do. We see a lot of really great work by volunteers, as you just said, with ESS and during the emergency response during a crisis, like a wildfire. We see reservists with the Canadian Forces, volunteers. We see search and rescue, right here in the central Okanagan and across the province, and across the country, really. We have really great volunteers that do really great work in the emergency service world. And so I thought, well, when we look at McDougall, this is what really sparked it. When we look at the McDougall Creek wildfire, when that started, when it was smoldering, I wasn't in politics then. I was looking up, as everyone probably in the central Okanagan was. They're looking, and it was smoldering there for like 48 hours. It was smoldering. It was just a little spot fire that was halfway up the mountain. You could see it right from the town. Probably had a great view from Kelowna here. And it smoldered for like 48 hours, like a very long time. And there was no resources on it. It was outside of the municipality. It was on Crown land, so it was the responsibility of BC Wildfire Service. But there was major fires at the time in North BC, and they were all deployed out there.
They're triaging constantly.
100%. I don't fault them for that at all. It's very important they do, and they're good at what they do. The problem is that everyone stood there watching and said, "Oh, Dan, you, me, and two other people could have walked up there and put that out," basically, right? If you have like the basic training, all of this. And I thought, everywhere where there's fires, there's always people there in those communities. So what if, rather than having to rely on emergency, and this isn't a point of replacing emergency services by any means, it's when there's something really bad happening like that, having people that have the training locally. There's always locals there that have local knowledge, that know Joe that's got a heavy machinery that can help build a fire guard that's right there, can go up, whatever that might be. I think tapping into that local ability to deploy, to defend your community, your neighbor's house, your house, and not just wildfires. I thought, you could have the basic fundamentals of wildfire, right? And not maybe a major fire, but something that's smoldering. They could just contact this, I wanted to call it the BC Volunteer Corps, and say, well, we've got a fire. Well, there's two people in Kelowna, there's two in West Kelowna. We'll send them up. They'll get the training. They'll have some equipment. They'll go up, put out the fire. You've just defended your community, or even give those same people a basic kind of understanding of policing, where basically you have a wildfire, and we see this all the time. We'll use Kelmore. So when Kelmore happened, police had to go in and they were doing evacuations. If that would have went longer, as McDougall did in other fires, police are deployed blocking the road and stopping people from going in. Well, if you have a 40-man detachment and you need to have all of these points, you need to have at least 2 officers. Sometimes they go to 1, but you'll have 2 officers there. So how many officers are left policing the community? It's a major problem with a major event like that. Well, imagine if you have 20, instead of having 40 officers deployed at just roadblocks, not doing, police enforcement, break-in enters and this type of stuff, just at roadblocks. Mm-hmm. And you then put a volunteer from the BC Volunteer Corps that knows how to interact with police. You then free up half your police force to go and police the town. Well, you have citizens helping the police, helping protect their community.
Trained, gone through protocols, know how to do it. They're still under the supervision of the other police.
Yes.
Exactly. that building that extra capacity. We hear people talk about the need for communities to be resilient. Well, part of resiliency is having that human capital that can supplant and support.
Yes, absolutely. I think, it was very popular too, as I was trying to, put it out there. I was kind of on social media with it. And then, of course, we went to votes and did our debate on it in the House in Victoria. It was popular. One thing that seemed really, and this was the secondary kind of thing to this whole private members bill, was like this esprit de corps, this kind of, I'm going to defend my province. If it's a provincial resource, you could say, well, you and I, let's say, sign up in West Kelowna. There's a fire in Quesnel. They need help. Well, the province could then take us with our training, ship a group of us from the central Okanagan up there because they're all in rough shape because the fire is affecting their homes. Then you could move in even some of these volunteers to help. So it's not replacing policing, fire, and so on. It's allowing a more efficient delivery of the service and making sure people are safe and allowing citizens to be directly involved in the solution.
Well, and also we have we've always talked about a 250 or 500 year earthquake.
Yeah,
that would be a major issue on the West Coast. So having just that extra pocket of people to help where needed, I think would be extremely helpful. Mm-hmm. So it got a vote.
Yes, did. Yeah.
So what happened?
It was actually, we had quite a few people in our caucus that have done emergency services or volunteer, reservists, police officers, firefighters that fought wildfires and so on, that were able to stand up and speak. It was very compelling. I thought they did a great job. My colleagues with my caucus, I think they articulated it very well. It went very well, but the government didn't agree with it. I'm not certain why. I sat down actually with the chief of staff and the EMCR, Emergency Management Ministry, and kind of explained my views of it. And I thought they were going to support it. They said there were some good things of it, but then when it came to the second reading and the vote, they all voted against it. But all of the opposition, including the Greens and the Independents, they were supporting it. They said, "Yeah, we support this." So if we would have had a tie, which would have happened, as you know, but for the benefit of your viewers, the speaker would have had to maintain the status quo kind of thing, and not. It would have voted to have more debate. We would have went to committee on it. And I believe if it went to committee, it probably would have been passed. It would be law right now. It would have passed. But what happened was it was 46 to 45. We lost by one vote because one independent MLA didn't show up for the vote. So
how frustrating is that? Yeah. So you even had Green Party members of the Legislative Assembly say that they were supporting. So cross-party support for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they liked it. I had a conversation and they said, it's a great idea.
So what's next for this idea? Because it sounds like you're pretty, you're very passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And it does sound like something that in British Columbia, whether it be floods, fires, or possibly earthquakes, we know that we're going to have those down the road.
Absolutely. And there seemed to be a lot of support at the time with my caucus and everything. They liked it. We did our debates in second reading. I left emergency management, went to public safety, which kind of has an element, obviously, of this bill. But I sat down with the then critic of emergency management, had a conversation about it, and I would like to keep pushing it. Maybe it's something that wouldn't be a private member's bill, and we can kind of push it. Maybe we can sit down with someone. Certainly the Greens support it. Maybe there's someone now after everything that's gone on in government that might support it, and we could have another go at it.
Well, I certainly hope that the idea develops. I certainly hope that if the provincial NDP government will not support your proposal, maybe a future Conservative government.
Yes, I stay tuned.
Great. Well, Macklin, I really appreciate you sharing so much of your time and insight today. You've really have given us a lot of perspective, whether it's been on some of your previous experience as a police officer, or whether it's with what you've shared as the MLA, helping out the people that right now need a champion at Okanagan Lake Resort, making sure that when fires suddenly flare up, that you're on the line with the minister. I'm reassured by that. Mm-hmm. And also making sure that we stand together with our municipal and First Nation communities to make sure that we get a fair shake on policing. So, I'm very, very happy to have our offices are actually, for people that don't know, we actually share offices at the West Kelowna City Hall right next to each other, so that when a citizen is having an issue provincially or federally, they don't have to, they can just go down to City Hall and they know that someone is going to be listening to them. So, Macklin, it's been a pleasure to serve with you, and I really appreciate you coming on Finding Solutions and sharing some of your expertise. And best of success in the days ahead, because I know being the opposition whip will have a lot of responsibilities. I know you're going to be up for the task.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
All right, so thank you again for listening to Finding Solutions, where We again try to get past the headlines, try to talk about the issues, and obviously meet with the people that have firsthand experience. And today I think Macklin was a great example of that, someone who's done the work. We also have a large library of other individuals. I try to interview the people that inspire me, and hopefully today you've been inspired as well. So we'll see you on the next episode of Finding Solutions. I'm Dan Elvis. Thank you.